everyone, Tom was here, and the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 draft is in the books. Looking forward to the 2026 NFL draft that will emanate from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people were like, were they going to make a QB move? They need a QB, they need a QB. In my mind, the eyes were always on 2026 to do it in front of the hometown crowd. Do they read into that much? Probably not. However, Green Bay, for years, decades even, were pounding the table to draft a first-round receiver. Everybody knew about it. Players knew about it. Quarterbacks knew about it. The fans knew about it. And this year, in front of their hometown fans, they drafted a first-round receiver. Could the Steelers do that with a quarterback, their QB of the future next year? Probably. They've set themselves very nicely with comp picks. Barring any changes, they are expected to have a third round, fourth round, fifth round, and sixth round comp pick. That would give them 2/3, 2/4, 2/5, 2/6. Is that necessarily enough to move up in the first round to get a guy? Because we know the Steelers don't lose. They don't tank a year to get a guy. They'll finish with their same 10-7 record. And by the way, the Steelers will finish with their same 10-7 record, regardless if it was Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, a quarterback. I don't care if Will Howard has to play some snaps. It's going to happen. That's the standard. Is the standard, and the standard is always 10-7 first-round playoff exit. But as mentioned in Omar Khan's postgame, that the Steelers did get better in the draft, and I do feel that way. We're going to get into those picks. We're going to talk a lot about the draft as a whole, because everybody had it right. Nobody was wrong about the 2025 NFL draft. Definitely not. It went exactly the way people expected. We're going to talk about that too. So let's get into our discussion, our post-draft recap of the 2025 Pittsburgh Steelers on Tom Was Here.
Hey, I'm Patrick Fabian, and you're watching Tom Was Here.
So as stated, the 2025 Pittsburgh Steelers draft is in the books. I have the sheet here. This is all the people they drafted. But before we get into that and discuss those picks, let's talk about these Shedeur Sanders in the room, shall we? Because the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 draft will be forever linked to not just Shedeur Sanders, but Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, and every other quarterback they could have potentially had in this draft, but especially more Dart and Shedeur. And I guess Milroe to an extent, because a lot of the other quarterbacks, your Quinn Ewers, went after the Steelers drafted Will Howard, in the sixth round. So what happened with Shedeur Sanders? Was it just hype? Was it Dion manufactured hype? That the NFL just decided that the kid's not good. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. I've seen so many theories. I will address Shedeur's fall based on two clips that I saw. One clip is when him and Cam Ward were on the field.
Come on, bro, let's make a song. Let's drop for him, Richie. I play football. Here we go.
Yeah, football.
I play football. You ain't got no hobbies outside of that?
I play football.
That's your only hobby?
I want people to know me as football player. Let's search up Cam Wood. We say American football.
There's a thing that NFL GMs use. Acronyms. My favorite is a JAG. Just a guy. If you're labeled as just a guy, that means you don't do anything special or anything different than anyone else. You don't stand out. You'll fill your role. There's quite a few guys in the NFL. In fact, I think every NFL team has a just a guy. A guy that's not spectacular. He comes in, he does his job. It's not, it's very workmanlike. But it's not it's not splashy. He won't make big plays. He'll just be there. Just a guy. But there's one that the NFL has added since NIL started. And that's DLF. Doesn't love football. And I'd like to credit who the analyst I saw that referenced this, because that one hit home for me. I don't feel, and this is just my personal opinion, he likes being a star. He likes the spotlight. He likes, making music and having like a rap career. He's a guy that would move on to say like do movies or music or something like that. He doesn't really love football. At least that's not the way it's portrayed. Also, I think NFL GMs didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze in terms of having to deal with him. When you come in above it all, and a lot of reports came out over this weekend saying, these anonymous NFL GMs said it's the worst interview he's ever had, etc., etc. He did music on the whole time, he wore too much cologne, all this weird stuff. We don't know what's true in that or not. But from Shedor's own mouth at the Combine, which he did not participate in.
Trying to change the franchise or the coach that don't give me. So you should know history repeats itself over and over and over. And I've done it over and over and over, so it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me. You think I'm worried about what critics say or what people got to say? You know who my dad is? They hated on him too. So it's like it's almost normal. Without people hating, it's not normal for us. So we like the adversity. We like everything that comes with the name. That's why we are who we are.
Not participate in the Shrine Bowl. Did not, the only thing he threw out was his pro day, which they said was a circus. Dion had this VIP seating and all this other stuff there. That's not a guy you want. That's not a team guy. That's a guy, if you said there's no I in team, he would say, well, there's a me though. That's the type of dude Shedeur Sanders is. And when the Steelers drafted Derek Harmon, number one, with the story of Derek Harmon, how his mother was on life support, how he uses NIL money to buy a van for her to get around, all this stuff to get her around, a character guy. They used a term that I heard several times during the weekend, which was Steelers DNA. And we should have all known at that point that they wouldn't draft Shedeur Sanders, because they can't have a guy that's a big character guy come in, and say like, oh, this is Steelers DNA, this is the guys we're looking for, and then have Shedeur with the giant chain, with the custom draft room and all that stuff. When Shedeur finally got drafted in the 5th, did you see the video? He was just in a room like everybody else, watching and celebrate. That's what it should have been. Don't act like you're above it all, like you're that much more special. Like every person, he had to have a custom draft room with a custom couch and all the hats and like a custom rack and all this stuff. Like no one wants that. And I'll be honest, I don't think the Browns want that. If you look at the faces of the Browns coach and the Browns GM, when they took this guy, they're about as miserable as you could possibly look. They didn't want him. And I know that because of the moves the Browns made just recently. They traded for Kenny Pickett. They traded a 5th-round pick. When you trade for a veteran and you're putting draft capital into a veteran, that's who you want. That was actually their slated QB1 going in before the draft. Because they're going to shut down Watson, and they're definitely going to do it now. They signed Joe Flacco this past week. They drafted Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd. It doesn't make a ton of sense for them to draft Shedeur in the 5th, other than the fact that the owner had to go out in front of people at the owners' meeting, acknowledge that the Deshaun Watson thing was a mistake, acknowledge that they're going to try to do better, and they made the move. But I'll be honest, if the owner doesn't have full control of that team, if it's not a draft day scenario, like the movie Draft Day, they literally pulled a Cleveland. The owner wanted them to draft a QB, and they drafted a QB despite having 5 QBs now on the roster. It's a strange thing that they did. I still haven't figured out what they did, but in my opinion, and I know Cleveland fans are kind of like, oh, QB1, you guys, QB1. That's your camp arm at the moment. That is your camp arm guy. He's nothing more than a camp arm. Because when you're a third-round pick, like a Dillon Gabriel, you'll get some chances. Very rarely does a third-round draft pick get cut. You know who does get cut often, all the time? A fifth-round draft pick, and sixth and seventh. You don't get as many chances there. So listen, it's not unprecedented. Let me not completely discourage Cleveland. It's not unprecedented. Look at your most recent Brock Purdy situation. Brock Purdy came in as a camp arm, and he beat out, Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, Trey Lance got hurt, and suddenly he's the guy. And it's not like Cleveland has a murderer's row of people in front of him to get around. Flacco will give him some nice competition. I pick on Kenny, but, whether Kenny will give him competition or not, the problem is Kenny was their slated QB1. Dillon Gabriel's their third-round pick. So he's going to have to come in humble, not flashy, not with an entourage, not make it about himself. He can come in and he can win those jobs via injury or via play. It's not saying can't happen. I'm just saying if he comes in with the same attitude he showed at the scouting combine with that interview, or during the draft, or in those pre-draft interviews, whether they're true or not, he may not be, he may be out. Also, I do think Cleveland has an idea that if a quarterback on a team doesn't have a lot of depth gets injured, suddenly you have a little trade bait there. But very unlikely, in my personal opinion, do I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be the QB1 for Cleveland this year. It's very unlikely. At the very least, he'll be learning off your Pickett's, your Flaccos, and your Dillon Gabriel. If they put him on the practice squad as a camp arm, maybe somebody could poach him if they want to deal with that burden. But I think a lot of people took him off that board. I don't think they wanted to deal with the hassle, the scrutiny of Dion, the flashiness of him. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And a lot of people don't feel he loves football enough. So that's my opinion on Shedeur, and that's why I think the Steelers didn't draft him. I think they wanted certain guys, and like I said, history will either prove me right or Mel Kiper right. Mel Kiper, and this hairdo is not a tribute to Mel, but Mel Kiper made a fool out of himself this weekend, just going on and on and on. Meanwhile, these kids, they wait in their entire moment. He can't shut up about Shedeur Sanders. He's just on everybody's moment. It's all Shedeur. So I can't believe Shedeur would fall. He fell past the Steelers, blah, 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 blah. Listen, this is the guy that shouldn't even be here this draft weekend. This is a guy that said if Jimmy Clausen's not a star, he's going to retire. He asked to give him 8 years. He said if Jimmy Clausen is a star in 8 years, he'll retire. Well, guess what, Mel? Jimmy Clausen gave you that answer in about 3 years when he was out of the league. So this guy's not right about everything. And even the people on the panel, your Reese Davises, your Lance Riddicks, your people are like, or it was Lewis Riddick. It was like, dude, you're not right about everything. Like, you're not batting 1,000, friend. Like, you're the guy that said Jamarcus Russell was John Elway. You know what I mean? This is the guy that said that. So this Mel Kiper making a complete fool out of himself this entire weekend about Shedeur, messing with every kid's dream, to be honest with you. This is the biggest moment of this kid's life. It's whoever. And he's still talking about Shedeur. It's the only person he can get out of his mouth. Dude. This dude might be a bum. But like I said, it's not a wrong possibility. The reason why I have no faith in Shedeur being anything is because he went to Cleveland. And the last time Cleveland was right about a quarterback, that guy's playing in Tampa Bay now. They gave up on him. They gave up on him completely. Cleveland does this. A tradition. That's their tradition. Their tradition is to be terrible at evaluating quarterbacks. Mel Kiper said the NFL's bad at evaluating quarterbacks. No, the Cleveland Browns are bad at evaluating quarterbacks. Not everybody gets it right, but Cleveland almost routinely gets it wrong. And when you have Kenny Pickett, who they traded for, Joe Flacco that they signed, Dillon Gabriel that they drafted in the third, who will have more chances than a Shedeur Sanders because they drafted him in the third. Shedeur Sanders is a camp arm. At best, starting out. You can win a job as a camp arm. People have done it. But I'm not going to sit these Cleveland fans that are, ready to throw the ticker tape parade, pump those brakes, kids, because I don't think it's happening. I very unlikely that he ends up being anything. So, let's talk about why you're here. The Pittsburgh Steelers draft, starting with Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle in the first round. Now, I didn't have Derek Harmon on my wishful thinking mock draft, although I did reference him. A reason why I didn't have Derek Harmon on that draft is because there was a concern about medical. What I found out after the fact is that all this talk about medical, and nobody could bring up what the medical was. There was no medical. Whether that was somebody's, because the draft in and of itself is smoke. Everybody throws out smoke and they put all this stuff out there. Happened with Shador, happened with everybody. But with Derek Harmon, he's like, I'm not sure why I was flagged for medical. I don't have any medical. And the Steelers, certainly when they asked, because there was a lot of smoke involved in the medical, when he was asked about it in the post-game press conference, Mike Tomlin said, we checked him over with our doctors and we were very comfortable. It's the same answer they gave with a Peyton Wilson last year who had a medical concern, and that's why he fell in the draft. They had no concerns, so I have no concerns. He seems like a high character guy. He seems like a guy that, he's really good. Like, if you look at the highlights, like you look at the tape from what I've seen, the guy's good. And look, that D-line was aging. The fact is that the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoff game against the Ravens got destroyed by Derrick Henry. Destroyed. 299 yards they let up in rushing. And the fact is that they remember that and they don't want that to happen again. So Derek Harmon being the pick here, I can't blame them. I can't blame them for that. That was always the big need going in the draft, not including quarterback. Although they must feel confident, very, very confident, that they're getting Aaron Rodgers, and I think Art Rooney said so as such in a interview prior to the draft. So going in, I was going into my wishful thinking mock draft with the idea that the Pittsburgh Steelers had no idea what was going on with Rodgers and didn't know what was going to happen with Rodgers. The Steelers must. They must. They must have some handshake, post-OTAs, or even training camp agreement. Who knows? I would like this handled before training camp. I would like the dude to go into, training camp knowing that he's the starter, if they're going that route. If they're not going that route and it's Mason Rudolph, I would like knowing that too. I don't want the looming specter of Aaron Rodgers. I'm not super enchanted about Aaron Rodgers joining the team. I don't know if that necessarily gets you anything more than a 10-win season and a first-round playoff exit, and I think Mason can do that too, to be honest with you. Keep in mind, they all had a 500 record with Duck Hodges. Mike Tomlin, if anything he can do, is no matter who the quarterback is, he can somehow cobble it together into a 9-10 win season. It's like clockwork. So, if they're of the mindset that Aaron Rodgers is joining this team, then they drafted accordingly for that. If it's still like we'll wait and see on Rodgers, then this draft, there's definitely things that get a lot more shaky in that regard. And one of them is not addressing the quarterback early. Because keep in mind, not just Shador, who had all the flags and everything and the potential, like people didn't want to deal with the all the stuff that came with Shador. There was Jackson Dart there. And just like with Shador and with other quarterbacks, even Jalen Milroe, they passed on a few rounds. Jackson Dart is another guy that, they could have got him at 21. They could have got him at 21. They chose not to, and we'll see what he ends up being as a pro, because the Giants traded up enough to want him in the first round. So he didn't start this process as a first-round guy. Does that mean he'll end this process as being better or worse than Daniel Jones, who was drafted a lot higher? But we're going to get into scenarios where players were drafted higher, yet for some reason these lower round players look better, which is strange. So they did not trade up in the second round. I was hoping they'd trade down in the first round to get another second round pick. They did not do that, and they waited till the third, and they got Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa, in the third round. Now, it's funny, in mock drafts, I didn't think they had a chance to sniff any of these running backs. I didn't think they had a chance at Caleb Johnson and Dylan Sampson and, you know, a lot of these guys that they, you know, Trayvon Henderson's and Quinshon Judkins. Now Henderson and Judkins went fairly early in the second. But Caleb Johnson sitting there in third. I'll be honest, I don't know why he was sitting there in the third. When I looked at his tape, I was like, well, he looks like Najee, doesn't he? Now, he is slightly faster. He is slightly faster than Najee. You know, beyond that, like, he does have a more patient running style than Najee, which at times Najee I would have liked to have had. But keep in mind, if we're talking about him being Najee 2.0 or something like that, Najee was drafted in the first round. Caleb Johnson's here in the third. You know what I mean? Like this is, if his floor is Najee 2.0, is that a bad thing in the third round? I don't think so. I think it's pretty good value to take him in the third round. And I like his highlights. Like I said, he looks pretty good. He didn't fumble the ball a lot. He ran for a ton of yards. He had a few catches out of the backfield. It wasn't overly like, you know, I think it was like 188 yards receiving or something, but just enough to show that he can do it. He could be an every down back for the Steelers. You change the pace back. I think Warren will get the first crack at that, but I think Caleb Johnson has the ability to eventually usurp Warren to take that every down role. I like Warren as more of a role, you know, kind of like a change of pace, but that doesn't mean he can't do it, because he can do it. He can definitely do it. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that with them. But I like the value here in the third. Like I said, if the floor is Najee 2.0, that's tremendous value at round 3. Now, round 4 is very interesting because there were plenty of quarterbacks still on the board. Plenty, including Shedeur for that matter. And they chose Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher from linebacker edge rusher from Ohio State. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with this TJ Watt situation. You know, the idea is I think a deal gets done. I don't think there's a chance that a deal doesn't get done. However, in case a deal don't get done, you know, you have a guy that kind of has a similar style and trait to a TJ Watt, to a Herbig. And think about this in this sense. You got Watt and you got Highsmith. And when they take a breather, you got Herbig and you got Sawyer. And man, that's some interesting thing there. And if you get Watt in camp, you know, not holding out, if he's, you know, coaching up Sawyer, teaching him the same way that he teaches Herbig, you know, punching out stuff and sacks and all this stuff, you could have a nice combo for many years to come. I don't know if edge was what they were going to select here in the 4th round. We don't know what the conversation was. You know, was the potential was Shedeur ever discussed? I'll be honest, don't know if he was. Even with the quarterback need, I don't think they ever discussed him at any point. There were 2 interviews that came out. One that said the Steelers interview did not go well at all. The other interview said the Steelers, well, it went great, and Tomlin likes him. Well, at least we know, based on how the draft fell out, that the second one not true. Because he had 4 chances to draft that dude, and they did not. They did not. They had no interest whatsoever, in my opinion. Or they didn't feel he fit in with the team or fit in with the culture. They don't feel he was the guy. So they took Jack Sawyer, character guy, Ohio State, big program. They love big program guys. So, you know, they're going defense heavy in a draft that I really thought they would do more offense. I really thought there would be a lot more offense, but they went defense heavy here. And I can't fault the Sawyer pick. If you look at the projections of the mock drafts of where Sawyer was supposed to go, every mock draft had him in the early 2nd round. Why he fell to the 4th is beyond me. As far as I know, there was no medical concerns. The only concern I saw in him is that he had said he had small legs. Who cares? That's those weird NFL intangibles where people are like, well, he's got small legs, so you can't do anything in the next. Is that true? That's not necessarily true. So I don't know why exactly he was here in the 4th round, but as a Steeler guy, it's funny. You don't hear NFL analysts go like, well, this guy looks like a Jaguar. He really looks like a Jaguar type, Or even, it's like, this guy looks like a bear. He looks like a bear. He looks like this team or that team. But you hear often, well, this guy looks like a Steeler, doesn't he? Jack Sawyer looks like a Steeler. That's not that's something you hear regularly. It's kind of in the nomenclature. It's in the regular analyst mindset. Is that the guy looks like a Steeler, and Jack Sawyer, man, looks like a Steeler. Like, that's another in a long line of potential guys that could be, a notable player in this league. Now, round 4 though. Round 4. You know what I mean? Like this is not something where it's like, oh, this is a slam dunk guarantee. There's a reason why he fell to round 4. I don't necessarily know what that is when I look at his tape, his resume, everything I hear about the kid. Shouldn't have been there in round 4. Don't know why he was, but happy he was and happy he's a Steeler, even though I feel like they had other needs. Round 5. Right around the time, is a little bit after Shedeur was taken, so you have that off the board. And I didn't mention that with Caleb Johnson round 3, they could have still taken Milroe. They didn't take Milroe. I think Milroe could be very good. I put him on my wishful thinking mock draft. He went to Seattle. That's a great spot for him. I think he'll do very well there. But in round 5, Shedeur, I think, was gone at this point. There were still some quarterbacks on the board. They took Yahya Black, the defensive tackle, defensive end, and big boy. I've been pounding the table for the Steelers to draft a plugger type for a long time. And, getting these guys like Montravius Adams year in, year out, Dan McCullers year in, year out, all these different Band-Aids they put over this position versus a draftable player in a notable round. And this guy was very high on draft boards. Once again, this is a guy that was in between a 2nd to 3rd round guy. That's where they were projecting him. I don't understand this draft at all, because there were so many players that had projections of 2nd and 3rd round that the Steelers found in like the 4th, 5th, 6th. I don't understand it, to be honest with you. It's very strange to me. And if they didn't go, like if Jack Sawyer didn't go to the 4th, who went ahead of Jack Sawyer, and what did other teams see in somebody ahead of a Jack Sawyer and a Yahya Black, the people that were ranked significantly higher than their draft position? Like, what did they see in them? I honestly don't know. I'd be very curious to see how that worked out. Obviously, time will tell as to whether a Sawyer or Caleb Johnson and Yahya Black and any of these guys end up being anything. But Yahya Black, I like the value of where they took him, and I think the idea was just to shore up the trenches, because all they're thinking about is the Ravens running roughshod on them, right up the gut. Right up the middle, they ran roughshod on them, and I think they wanted to shore up that area, and I can't blame them for it. So we're at round 6, quarterback Will Howard out of Ohio State, linking him back with Jack Sawyer, the linebacker. And man, it's weird. I look at the film, and I like the film. I look at the like the kid and the character or whatever. But I've seen these narratives of people's like, why did the Steelers take Will Howard over Shedeur Sanders? Well, they didn't, did they? Shedeur Sanders went before. Doesn't make any sense. It would be like why the Steelers passed up on Cam Ward for Derek Harmon. It's like, well, they didn't. Cam Ward went first. Maybe he went before. Like, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, in that sense, Cam Ward was the first overall pick versus them having 4 chances at Shedeur Sanders, 3 chances at Jalen Milroe, and many other guys, 1 chance at Jackson Dart. They had those chances, but they took Will Howard here. But if you look at the game stuff, if you look at his play over time, man, I mean, won a national championship with Ohio State, looked every bit the part. Whether or not, he'll be any good at the next level, who's to say? It's hard to judge a guy to have a lot of faith in a Will Howard in the 6th round when guys like Landry Jones went in the 4th. Josh Dobbs went in the 4th. Here's Will Howard in the 6th. Quinn Ewers, who had a very productive year at Texas, went in the 7th. Certain guys that their ranking on draft boards and draft mock-ups was significantly higher than where they ended up being drafted. Another exceptional value, I feel, in round 6. But, man, he was projected as a 3rd, 4th round guy, and he went in the 6th. Quinn Ewers was ranked around the same projection, and he went in the 7th. Jalen Milroe, who was ranked, a fringe 1st round guy, I saw mocks with Steelers taking Milroe in the 1st. He went in the 3rd. So I don't know. This is the strangest year where QBs, it seems, there was like a few QB needy teams and everybody else was like out of the QB game. Like they didn't bother with it. So it's real strange how that worked out. But man, Will Howard, he could be good. He don't have to, you have him sit behind Mason Rudolph, behind Aaron Rodgers. Now, do I feel, what are the odds that a kid, the 6th round, takes over and ends up being a franchise? It's not high. You have your Brock Purdy's of the world. You have your, Tom Brady's of the world. In what world other than Steelers wishful thinking do you go like, Tom Brady went in the 6th? No, it's not. I think he could be good. There's a chance he could be good. But, man, it's a lot to ask out of a kid from the 6th round. But you know what? Based on the big program, based on him winning everywhere he went, based on him being, have the right size, the right thing, his arm's pretty good, he can run. Stranger things have happened. I hope they develop him good. I hope he's every bit of what the potential could be for a top guy. But I'll be honest, I think they're looking for a 1st round pick in next year's draft when that QB class is deep, very deep. And that's not even like an Arch Manning. Like there's like, I saw a early mock draft and it was like 8 quarterbacks in the first or something insane. At least six, and that's a lot. I think in front of the hometown crowd they do draft a quarterback of the future. But you know what? Will Howard could win a lot of fans in this town. And especially, he plays above expectations or he comes in and wins some games and suddenly you got a situation where maybe you don't have to worry about a quarterback if this dude's delivering the goods. But that's me really wishful thinking. So, now we're on to, I think they traded back in the 5th? They traded back a few spots to gain an additional 7th, which I thought was an odd move until I heard the name Carson Bruner. And my immediate reaction was, I wonder if he's related to Mark Bruner. Sure enough, that's his son. Mark Bruner is a former tight end for the Steelers. He's also one of their scouts. So, of course, they're going to add Carson Bruner. But the fact is that, one, the Steelers don't leave a draft without a linebacker. And they wanted that additional pick. They wanted to have that same, even though they didn't have a pick in the 2nd round, they still wanted to have a draft class that had 7 players. So I really think that's what it boils down to. They like having 7 players in a draft class. And so adding that additional 7th, they were able to do that. And of course they do it with Mark Bruner's son, who works for the team. Now Carson Bruner, could be a depth guy. Now they have a boatload of middle linebackers. So it's going to be a tough hill to climb to get him. He's going to really have to show out to, be on that middle linebacker. I have a feeling this could be like a practice squad guy. I really do. But 100 tackles. So it's not like he's the thing. If he can play some special teams, that'll get you a hat on game day. So you want to play special teams for sure. But of course, had I known, I was like, oh, it's Mark Bruner's son? Yeah, of course they're going to draft that dude. Of course, why wouldn't they? So the final pick of the 2025 NFL Draft for the Steelers was Dante Kent. He was corner. And I didn't know much about him. He's a small program. But he is a kick returner. And man, the Steelers could use a kick returner, couldn't they? The fact that Cordell Patterson is still on this team is bizarre to me. I don't understand it. I really don't understand it at this point. He looked like he was toting a wheelbarrow last year. We didn't get the best out of him. And why he's still on the team other than maybe a friendship with Arthur Smith is beyond me. Personally, I don't want to see him returning kicks. I don't want to see him, to be honest, on the team. If this dude can come in and come out and be the kick returner, that's fine by me. We also, cornerback depth would be nice. There are certain guys that weren't drafted, like a Kobe Bryant for that matter, that I really thought the Steelers would be in on, especially in the 7th round here. But they took this small school guy, probably because of his kick returning ability, versus, say, a Kobe Bryant. I don't think Kobe Bryant was able to return kicks, but that dude getting drafted. That's the strange thing about this draft. Almost everybody, as I mentioned in the wishful thinking mock draft, I didn't think the analysts knew where players were going to go. And man, was I right. A lot of these guys that were on these boards that were highly touted, they didn't go till sometimes undrafted. They didn't go till the 6th, the 5th, rounds later. And then what their projection on these mock draft by these so-called experts that watch this stuff the entire offseason, they know everything. And some of these guys didn't go at all. So I think this was a very hard draft to predict and to navigate for a lot of people because they didn't know some of these guys that were going. Like, for example, I'm just looking here at the, the Steelers added some undrafted guys. And one of them is Ben Sauls, the kicker from Pittsburgh. He was one of the most accurate kickers in the college football last season. Yet he didn't get drafted, and other kickers got drafted in the 5th. What they saw better than him, was leg range or distance or whatever, who knows? But it's just strange to me people that projected some of these guys. Rock Taylor, the wide receiver from Memphis, that had a pretty good, receiving year in Memphis, did not get drafted. Several other players that I saw, the guy that I wanted, that big plugger, that massive dude from Florida, the biggest athlete in NFL history, 464 pounds, ended up being an undrafted free agent. They had him as a day 3 guy. He didn't make day 3. He ended up signing with Tampa Bay as undrafted. A lot of guys did as undrafted. So very strange to me. Very strange to me how this draft kind of worked out. Because a lot of names went a lot of different places, and nobody really seemed to know from Shador on what was going to happen. And it showed because all these guys went rounds later, and I don't know who was drafted ahead of these guys in certain instances. Very strange. But the undrafted free agent guys, the ones I've seen so far, and I know they added a quarterback today, but I can't remember offhand who that was. I didn't have him on this list, but Rock Taylor, wide receiver from Memphis, DJ Thomas Jones, a fullback from South Alabama, Sebastian Castro, the safety from Iowa. I was like, man, that name sounds so familiar. I'm like, why do I know Sebastian Castro? Was that somebody I looked into and I projected? No, I was I hit the transfer portal in NCAA football, the video game, and ended up in Iowa, and Castro was a monster. He was a monster on the NCAA video game. That doesn't mean he'll be a monster in real life. Aiden Williams, a guard from Minnesota. Ben Sauls, the kicker from Pitt. J.J. Galbraith, another tight end. They're adding another tight end from South Dakota. They only have 500 tight ends. Keyshawn Williams, a wide receiver from Indiana. Man, he looked pretty awesome. If you watch some of his highlights, he got broken tackles. Speedster. Very curious about him. And then Blake Mangelson, the DN from BYU. And I think they added a couple today as well. I didn't see them. Undrafted free agents, one of these guys I named might be something. A lot of these guys end up being practice squad fodder. Sometimes you find your way into a Jaylen Warren. You find your way into a Mike Hilton. You find your way into a guy like that. And usually the Steelers are pretty good, better than most, I would say, at finding these undrafted guys to be good. So one of them may end up being good. But I'm interested to see kind of how this breaks down. I did notice that, as mentioned, they did add a quarterback, to the undrafted free agent listing today to bring in as a camp arm, which, a a lot of people would say, well, wow, you're bringing him in as a camp arm. If you're bringing him as a camp arm, maybe you're out of Rodgers. But they still have a veteran to add. As the Steelers said, we're going to bring in another veteran guy. Whether that is Cousins, whether that is Rodgers, whether that's someone else, who knows? But they're going to add a guy before training camp starts. And all signs point to Aaron Rodgers, whether he'll be good or whether I want him to be or not. That's probably what's going to happen. The odd signing, something that occurred today, is the Steelers added Robert Woods on a 1-year, $2 million deal. Another vet for the receiving room, another Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, insert any veteran receiver the Steelers have added as of late. Who knows how much he got left? Is he just there to coach the young guys on the field? Is this like a mentor thing? Because they kind of do have a youngish wide receiver room. You assume DK can go into that role, but, who's to say? For me, it's an odd move. I don't know exactly what the deal is with that move. Obviously, it doesn't guarantee him to the roster by any stretch, but I'd like to have some receiver depth, and I'm not saying he couldn't do things, but, you just wonder how much. He hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2019. I don't know how much, left he has in the tank. So that's your Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 draft. I personally feel the Pittsburgh Steelers, what they said, did get better this past weekend, and they did so with guys who, as they said, are Steelers DNA, high character, team captain guys who, are not going to bring any. I mean, we don't know, but let's say they didn't draft them based on potential to be trouble, like other players that could have been drafted. They haven't shied away from that in the past, but in this particular draft, a lot of the guys they drafted are kind of team captain, high character, big play, big program guys that have said and done the right thing, not caused any trouble, not been drama, not brought an entourage to meetings, all that stuff. So I think that's the kind of route they are taking, and we'll see whether or not that ends up working for them or not, because they're linked now. Keep in mind, this is the same team that passed on Lamar Jackson, who is a multi-time MVP, maybe should have won his third this year, which instantly puts you in the Hall. He's a Super Bowl away from a Hall of Famer already. And they passed on him for Terrell Edmunds. They don't always work. Sometimes it don't always look good. I'll be honest, I was critical of that Terrell Edmunds thing as soon as they drafted him. Had nothing to do with Lamar Jackson and what he ended up. But the fact is now that Lamar Jackson has won 2 MVPs in this league, that he's potential to be a Hall of Famer on a Hall of Fame track, and Terrell Edmunds is out of the league, tells you everything you need to know. Like I said, they don't always get it right. And we romanticize drafts as these guys that I'm talking up, and Caleb Johnson and Jack Sawyer. I can go back years from now. You can watch. Feel free to watch some of these old videos of guys that I pounded the table, and I'm like, this guy's a can't miss. This is the guy. This is the Steelers guy. They're not all right either. But I'm not sitting here like Mel Kiper and trying to, say that, I'm right about everything and the NFL's wrong about everything. No, the Steelers have been wrong plenty. I've been wrong plenty. But as far as this draft, I like it. I think it's pretty good. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on the Pittsburgh Steelers draft. I normally do this live, but, did the live for the first round. So, I was just, you know what? I just want to ramble on for a bit without being sidetracked, and that's what I did here. So, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you're new here, make sure to like, share, subscribe, support me on Patreon like John Bailey, like Brett Persing. Like Faye, you can do so. Link is in the description below. If you'd like to buy a t-shirt, a TomWasHere t-shirt, you can do so at Spreadshirt, as well as links to my eBay store, Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok, whatnot, Arena Club. The links are in the description below. But when it comes to the next Pittsburgh Steelers video, or the next video in general, We will see you soon. But until then, bye everyone.